We love it when black people are spotlighted for the incredible work they do. And my next guest is no exception. This year, Tennessee native Juanita Ingram became the first black woman to be named Mrs. Universe. The attorney, filmmaker, and TEDx speaker is using her platform for more than just pageantry. Ingram wants to advocate for others. She wants to inspire those who decide to make a life pivot. And she wants to convince black Americans to consider a new way of life by exploring living outside the country. And she puts the roadmap in her new book. It's called Navigating Change, Embracing the Unknown and Finding Purpose. Mrs. Universe 2022-2023, Juanita Brown Ingram joins me right now on the griot. First of all, congratulations on this book. Congratulations on winning Mrs. Universe. All of it is extraordinary. Now, I just got to know, were you like writing a book and became Mrs. Universe? Did you become Mrs. Universe because you was writing a book? How did these two things go together?
You know, this is not my first book. So I had written books before, and actually the book is off of the tail of my TED Talk. So my TED Talk was all about navigating change, and you put so much work and effort into giving a TED Talk, and I thought, you know what, I can expound upon this. It's really a book, and it just all kind of circled together. I don't think if I hadn't been living abroad, I probably wouldn't be Mrs. Universe. So they do go hand in hand.
I like that. Now, you talk a lot about the pivot, and
Yes.
you don't just talk it, you live it. You went from lawyer to TV producer. Now you're a voting member of the Television Academy. I mean, you change and pivot in ways that are not just dynamic and dramatic, but just cool as hell. How'd you do it?
You know, it's all about planning and one, giving yourself permission to pivot. I think a lot of times, especially coming from a traditional industry or a traditional discipline like being a lawyer, sometimes we put limits on ourselves. Sometimes other people put limits on us. When I first moved abroad, a lot of people questioned me. They thought I was crazy. I am what the industry considers to be a trailing spouse. So it was my husband's job that technically moved us abroad. And I was assistant general counsel at a company at the time. And just about every black woman in my life asked me, you know, you making good money and you have a good job. Are you sure about stepping away to do this? And I had to give myself permission to know that I had all of these other skill sets, all of these other desires that I had suppressed and pushed down because there's a season for everything. And I think that allowing myself and giving myself permission to pivot, to plan, to plant myself in a different way and to explore the full dimensional aspect of who I am allowed me to make that pivot. And then I'm trying to help other people to navigate this change. I've been an expat now for 10 years.
You mentioned a couple of things that I want to talk about, right? One of them is this idea of being a trailing spouse. In your book, you talk about trailing spouse syndrome. What's that?
Yes. You know, I didn't even know what that was until I started creating my own show, and I had to research that as a storyline because no one talked to me about it. And I researched it. It is actually a clinical diagnosis. It is, some people call it trailing spouse depression, some people call it trailing spouse syndrome, but it's really just a loss of identity. When you move, and you can become a trailing spouse even if you move domestically, you don't have to move abroad. But it's anytime you trail your partner, they go to the new location with a purpose. You have to find your purpose. And I underestimated the gravity of stepping away from my legal career because I had always been Juanita the attorney and exploring, okay, well, who else is Juanita? Who all am I? What all am I? What all can I do? And just mourning what was and what I thought the trajectory was going to be so that I could let it go and embrace what was in front of me, which was much greater than what I was letting go. But trailing spouse syndrome is a real thing. And it affects a lot of trailing spouses. So it's a real diagnosis.
Well, let's talk about this other thing before we go. Now, you are a proponent of Blaxit. You've been talking about it, Black Americans moving from the U.S. What made you leave? I understand you trailed your husband. What was the specific thing? Where'd you go? What's been going on?
I've lived in London, Taiwan. I currently live in Singapore. That's where I'm at right now. I think, you know, at times it becomes exhausting to be Black and be an American. I'm an advocate for doing what is right in the right season. Living abroad is not for everyone, but sometimes it is the right time to take a break. We have a history of Black people, everyone from Frederick Douglass to Tina Turner to Maya Angelou to Felicia Rashad, that have taken a break, expound their horizons, allow for different cultures to allow them to have a break. Sometimes it's exhausting being Black in America, and I wanted Black people to know that they have options. So I created the show, I wrote the book. I wanted to really highlight this space of being an expat, which is really short term and seasonal, and showing how that affects how we live, how we thrive, how we go from survival to thriving, and how it is an option.
Wow, your book does amazing work. You've also done work in the community. You've been involved with Dress for Success, helping folk get on track with their clothes and with professions. I mean, you've done so much, and it's extraordinary. Everybody, Juanita Brown Ingram is one of those people who, whenever she writes something, you need to read it. And her book right now is called Navigating Change, Embracing the Unknown and Finding Purpose. Juanita, thanks so much for joining me, my sister. Everybody, as always, we encourage you to support your Black-owned bookstore when you grab the book.